Sometimes in life, the only thing you can do to combat violence is to use a greater proportion of violence. For some people, it's all they understand. The Diaries of a Doorman, Bouncing in the Sun, Volume 3. Written by Stu Armstrong. Just as the third bang thudded, I heard splintering wood, and in came the door. I'm not sure just who was the most surprised, us or him, as I picked up the closest thing to hand and smashed him full in the face with it as hard as I could. The sickening noise of cracking bone and cartilage seemed to fill the air for a second as he hit the floor. I stood over him with my weapon in hand, ready to twat him one again, but he was out cold. I must have looked a sight, standing there over the prone body of a massive, muscle-bound Latin bouncer with a tin of Heinz beans and sausages held above my head. The flight was good, but nothing to write home about, apart from a stewardess called Marissa. But what I do remember vividly was almost choking in the back of the plane with all of the smokers. Just imagine being allowed to smoke on a plane now. Seems mental, doesn't it? As we started the descent, I started to get the great feeling of excitement and anticipation in my stomach. Then we were towards the final approach, and I could see the lights of Tenerife shining up at me. Twinkling light, the lights of the promised land. I just couldn't wait to get off. So as soon as we touched down, before we even stopped taxiing along the runway, I jumped up to get my bag out of the overhead locker. I think I just about started a ride, as when I got it, everyone decided to do as well. As we came to a full stop, and the howl of the huge turbines on the plane was starting to subside, and the screeching of the tyres had stopped, I was off like a shithouse rat up a drainpipe, stopping only for Marissa the stewardess's number. Well, I was in such a hurry to be off the plane that I ended up first on the bus, which means last off. So all my rushing got me was last off a squashed up, sweat-smelling fucking cattle truck. So, off into the baggage area to wait a lifetime for my suitcase. Well longer than usual, because long after everyone had their baggage, including Andy, when all that was left was a cardboard box stuck together with tape with Sol Golf written on it for the address. I was still waiting like a limp dick for my baggage to come out. I was just starting to get annoyed, looking around and no one to ask when a door banged open, and a sweaty Spanish customs officer came strolling out of some doors, without a care in the world, all tooled up with his truncheon, which looked like he'd been using it to club baby seals with for years, his rusty old handcuffs, and a pristine shiny black handgun that perfectly complemented the half-broken mirrored sunglasses perched on his nose and the remnants of what once had been a tab hanging out of his mouth. With just me and a bored-looking Andy left in the baggage hall, we both jumped with the bang from the door echoed around the empty marble-floored baggage hall, and out he strolls, bored look on his face but strutting like a dog with two cocks. And what's that scraping noise? Well, that was my suitcase, all smashed and broken with its bits hanging out of it. Oh, great, I thought, here we go. Armstrong? You Armstrong, he shouts at me. I felt like saying, no mate, I am the bloody Pope. It's not if there's anyone else here now, is there? Apart from Andy, the smug prick with his case. Well, I have had more than my fair share of run-ins with customs. The amount of times I have been searched is unreal. Still, never a cavity search, so not so bad. So over he comes with all the charm and personality of a lump of mouldy cheese, and when he got closer he smelt like a two. Yours? He says. You Armstrong? Yes mate, I said to him. So out of the airport we go. Obviously we had to make our own way to Los Cristianos, which meant a costly taxi fare for someone. Okay, it was me. Decided we would try and sneak onto one of the buses going there. It wasn't happening unless we climbed into the baggage hold on the bottom of one of the coaches, and that wasn't happening. So, off we go in search of a taxi. And just across the road was more old wrecked Mercedes taxis than you have ever seen. And to say that I'd had a few too many sherbets would be the understatement of the year. I was mortal. In fact, a mortal mess. Anyway, I ended up going back to a hotel with a bird in her early 20s. As I remember, a beautiful, stunning girl, but as I had the old beer goggles on, she was probably a complete hoglet. So we went back, had a few drinks, and she told me she was on holiday with her parents as they were paying, but was having a rubbish time as her dad was totally overprotective of her, and in the last 2 weeks had already knocked out two blokes that had shown an interest in her, and they had argued and fell out about it tonight, and she'd buggered off on her own. She said they wouldn't be back for a good while yet, so the deed was done. Or shall I say the deed was being done, as I heard a crashing sound, and it was a sound of a massive gorilla-like creature with a Cockney accent, crashing through the room, shouting he was going to kill me. Oops, Daddy's home, I thought. He was a raging complete head the ball. So trying to get my clothes on as I ran, I headed to the doors that led to the balcony. Somewhere in my drunken state, I seemed to remember not going up any stairs or lift, so I presumed that I was on the ground floor. Not having time to grab my shorts or shoes, I jumped over the balcony wall. To my shock, we must have been 4 or 5 stories up. As I crashed into the ice-cold water of the pool below, I didn't know where I was at first, but it was fucking lucky there was a pool where it was. We headed down the strip for a few beers. As you will all have seen, you can't get moved for little piss ants, also known as PRs, who get paid to get you into the bar they work in. Well, this Spanish kid with funny looking eyes came over and said to my mate, "You like girls? Come in my bar, plenty girls." Well, that was enough for my thick mate, and straight after him he went. My God, he still believes shit like that. So in we go, and it was an odd place, with the exception of a massive, and I mean massive, Spanish bouncer on the front door, and another just as big inside. The bar was empty. My mate pulls up a stool and we sit down. "Come on then, it's your round, Stu." To which I reluctantly ordered a couple of beers. A small, ratty-looking man then wanders in, and by the respect he is given, I presumed he was the owner of the bar. He walks over and claps his hands, his long, skeleton-like fingers yellow with nicotine stains, and he shouts, "Girls, I get you girls, my friends." And that's when I started to think that there was a rabbit away. A few seconds later, in walked 2 absolute stunners. Absolutely gorgeous birds they were, but they were dressed up only in underwear, complete with stockings, suspenders, the lot. Now I knew we had ended up in a fucking brothel, hadn't we? For fuck's sake. So this bird wanders over to me, sits down and gives me the eyes and said, "Would you like to buy me a drink?" "Would I fuck, pet?" I tell her, as I look over to Andy, the thick fuck he is, ordering an orange juice for the other bird. Just then I whispered in his ear, "You stupid cunt, we're in a brothel, and they're going to take your eyes out for that orange juice." He went white and shit himself. Just then the barman tries to charge him the equivalent of the best part of 50 quid for the drink. We were fucked, but the big baboon just didn't seem to tire at all. So we ran through the complex and over the back wall, and eventually found ourselves back at our apartment. We ran in and locked the door. After a few seconds we could hear running footsteps and laboured breathing. And then the footsteps stopped just outside the door. We could still hear the breathing. Staying inside, as still and as quiet as we could, almost frightened to breathe, when we heard the first bang we shit ourselves. He was barging or kicking in the door from the outside. Just as the third bang thudded, I heard splintering wood, and in came the door.